Morning, can you hear me?
Hey Don, how you
Hey,
doing?
I'm good. How about you?
Hey, I'm doing well. I think we had one of your superintendents signed up and they haven't logged in yet.
Okay.
And I don't think I can get the registration from where I'm at to tell you who it was. I've been racing between meetings.
Yeah, I know it's Dr. Waddington. He's at a small school, so if the bus driver's sick or the furnace blew up or whatever, he's probably it's him.
I, I get it. Um, but yeah, we'll hang tight here. Sometimes it takes a couple minutes to get logged in, depending on the computer.
Yeah.
So how have you been?
Good. Yeah, yeah. Busy. How about you?
Same, and going on vacation next week, so I feel like I'm cramming about 3 weeks of work into this week.
Yeah. Where you going?
Florida,
Oh,
so
nice.
get a little sunshine for a week
Yeah.
before winter hits.
Yeah, it's already started to hit here.
Uh, what's your weather like right now?
It's nice. It's the mid 40s in the mornings and mid 60s in the afternoon. So not bad, but we had snow a couple last week we had snow. So
Oh my, that's early.
yeah.
And I'm fine. We'll wait here a few minutes. I can walk you through and show you the system, a high-end overview if you want to do that, or however you want to handle this if you can't make it.
Yeah, yeah. If yeah, and then at least I can, when people have questions about it, I'll be able to, talk smart about it at least.
Yeah. So we'll give it 3 or 4 minutes here.
Sounds good.
I'm going to step over to my desk and grab a couple things. I'll be right back. All right. So really at a high level, Don, this is a cloud-based system. So everything's hosted on Microsoft Azure. So highly secured, makes the deployment really simple for school districts, large or small. The sum total of kind of what needs to happen to deploy this is if they're going to run it at the front desk, they can buy the hardware pack. It's a 2D scanner, a Dymo printer, takes about 2 minutes per workstation. We've got a QR code they scan, puts all the settings into the scanner and about two settings on a printer, and they're off and running. And so then we do updates about every month. We push out updates in the system. All of that happens typically on a Friday night, Saturday morning, seamless, nothing to do from an IT perspective. It's there on Monday when you come in. And if they're, larger development projects that are changing things or making advances in different areas, we would have put out an email in advance. Hey, on Monday, blah, 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 here's what you're going to see. We also do kind of a monthly safe visitor tips and tricks. And so that way, users of the system can log in for about a 20-minute once a month. Hey, here's some new features. Here's how to use some things. Hey, here's how a school over here has created a process for managing this. And so we're constantly kind of, putting information out there. to help them become better users of the system. We've got chat built into it down here in the right-hand corner. So literally if they're in there working and they're like, I don't know how to do this, that, or the other, click on this real time, during normal business hours, can get the questions answered. Dashboard completely configurable. So what you're seeing right here, what we would classify as a temporary visitor would be low risk, low frequency. Maybe I'm coming into a school for a meeting, so I'm not having any direct or ongoing contact with a student. What it's going to do when they click this button right here is it's going to scan the 2D barcode on the back of their government issued ID. That can be any US-based government issued ID, military ID. Really, we support anything in North America. So that would be Canadian, Mexican matricula card. Any of those can be scanned into the system. As I'm previewing it for you right here, this is what it would look like if your visitor walked into a front office security or secretary desk and they're running it at the desk. You can also use kiosk. We have custom kiosk, and these are standalone or they're wall mount, or you can create your own kiosk using kind of approved tablets and hardware. The kiosk method is really just one more layer of interacting with visitors before you buzz them into a building, so that if you have an awkward conversation because somebody pops up on the excluded list, somebody pops up on a sex offender registry, now you're actually managing that before they're standing in front of you at the desk. So three different ways that this can be deployed for a school district. If they come in temporary, click on this. It also gives them an option to either search by name or to input somebody manually. And think in terms of somebody coming in with, a passport that does not have a 2D barcode. It's a different type of technology. So once they confirm and authenticate that, they could enter them manually into the system. I'm going to actually scan a 2D barcode on the back of a simulated ID. What it does is it parses that information on the back of that ID. When it parses that information, you see how it pulls it into the appropriate fields.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and it happens just quickly. If they're doing it at a kiosk or at the front desk, either way, it's very quick. It authenticates that ID. If they're at the front desk, this camera would actually be rear facing toward the visitor. At the kiosk, it clearly would be facing them. They would take their own picture, or front office team clicks and takes the picture. Once they click continue, what just happened is it ran against a national sex offender data, and it runs against an internal excluded parties list. So each school can create a list of individuals that are denied access to their property or have some kind of restricted access. And if they tried to enter the facility, it would populate here, would share whatever information. If it's a sex offender, typically we would have a photo and all that additional information. On the exclusion list, it would have whatever information that was entered by that school. If it comes back clear, this is what it looks like right here. Either the front office team types this in, or at a kiosk, they would have entered all this information before they submit. And so once they enter that, they would allow and print a badge. Before I do that, I want to mention two things. Right now, you've got this deny entry button and you've got this emergency button. These two buttons are internal communication tools, not 911 or any kind of alert system. If you click this denied entry, let's say it popped up on a sex offender check here that the person was on a registry. You click denied entry. What we're going to do is we're going to push by text or email the information that's been captured to whomever you have configured. So at a school district, we've got some schools as large as 300 schools on their campus. It's the 7th largest school district in the country. They have Global notification. So a school can say, hey, I'm a director of security, I'm an administrator, I'm a superintendent. I want to be notified anytime this happens, but I will not be a direct responder. Then each building can set up building level contacts. So school A, you might have principal, assistant principal, SRO. And so it's going to push that information to them and let them know they've got a denied entry at the front desk. So if they're in charge of communicating, they can take that information on their phone, go to the front office, communicate with that person while they're not allowed on the property. Same thing with the emergency button. This would go out as an emergency alert as opposed to a denied entry. Typically in a school setting, this is unruly visitor. Somebody shows up, they don't like information they received, they can't meet with somebody. And if they come up here and click this button, it can be the same group or it can be a different group that receives that emergency communication. Here's Lake Stevens of Washington Schools. Randy Solori, their director of security, has introduced us to Rapid Responder Easy Alert. And so we've started down a road of integration discussion with them. And so probably over the next 60 plus days, we will be doing an integration where this denied button and this emergency button would actually be passed over to them so that the schools utilizing that crisis alert system could manage that within that one alert management system. So if there's escalations and two-way communication, any of those pieces then could be managed in one alert system.
Oh, that's nice. That's a nice feature for sure, having that integrated.
Oh, that's going to be really nice. And we've kind of had a second round of meetings to kind of define out technology wise. And now it's a matter of just kind of getting it on both of our development calendars. Let's assume here everything comes back clear. They allow and print a badge. I think I can post this as a PDF as opposed to printing automatically. Couple different options. The school can elect to print kind of a self-adhesive badge. It's got a stop sign on it. It's a self-expiring badge. So once it prints down here in this bottom corner, there'd be a stop sign with a sticker over it. And in about 6 hours, the stop sign would bleed back through, so they could not re-enter a building with that same ID tomorrow. It's going to have their classification. If they're a visitor, volunteer, contractor, student, teacher, whatever the school creates in terms of registration types, that's what prints. Their name, building, who they're visiting, date and time stamps. Got a 2D barcode they can scan out when they leave the facility so that they get the exit log. Randy Solori, actually, they don't print. So if the business rule at the school is we don't want to print an ID, we can set this to non-print. And they use a lanyard system, and they use colored lanyards. So the actual strap on the lanyard, they color code them, and that distinguishes for them the different type of visitor that's in a building, and they can tell from a distance based on that color of the lanyard what type of visitor that is in the building. So once that either prints at the secretary's desk, we just rolled out some functionality. So for schools that are using kiosk, they can elect to have everybody interact with a kiosk, but then it pushes over to the front office team to review everybody from the kiosk. Or we just released a print option that a school could say, hey, on our volunteers, we know who they are. When they come in, they scan their ID, we authenticate them. We want it to automatically print at the kiosk if it doesn't, if it doesn't show up on an exclusion list or a sex offender hit. So it gives them some options of how they want to manage that. Once they're logged in, they show up on the dashboard. So for somebody working in, say, elementary school A, they're only going to see who's logged into their building. But if I'm an administrator, I can log in anywhere in the world. I have an internet connection, and I can see who's in all buildings, or I can scan through specific buildings and see who's in a building at any given time. There is a pre-registration option. This comes in very handy. I know Randy uses this a lot over at Lake Stevens for big events like Grandparents' Day or Veterans Day. And with those events, we would create a specific URL for that school district, and they could send this out and, however they communicate, paper forms that go home with the children, text, email, however they communicate with parents. And they would click on this link, they would pre-register. Once they pre-register, then they're going to show up in this visitors arriving soon. So it's going to show anybody coming in today, anybody scheduled over the next 7 days. You can pre-register 10 years in advance, but it'll only be presented here within a 7-day window. So literally when somebody, if you had a couple hundred people coming in for a Grandparents' Day, as they enter the building, if you're printing a badge, you're just clicking one arrow, boom, print, off they go. So you could move, literally hundreds of people through the process in just, 1 or 2 seconds per visitor.
Nice.
This last tab, visitors nearby, this is with our geofencing. So we can take each building and we can even go more granular than that. I believe Randy over at Lake Stevens has one building that has 3 separate uses within that one building. And we can geofence each of those areas of the building separately. Once we set up those GPS coordinates, then high frequency visitors, say like a volunteer, once they've been through the process and been vetted and approved, they can download a mobile app. Once they download that mobile app and activate it, as they approach a building or location, it's going to pop up on their phone and it's going to say, you're near elementary school A, do you want to enter? And they'll push a button, which we call a doorbell, on their app, and then it would send a request to enter to the front office team. So literally by the time they come up and buzz the front door, their information's already set in here on the dashboard for them to, line of sight or through a video, a phone, be able to identify them before they let them enter the building. And this is kind of a unique process for Washington State schools. We had, and it was, I give Randy a lot of credit down at Lake Stevens. He's a real forward thinker. And primarily, comes out of he's a former police chief, former military police. So he's got a long history of security risk management. And so Randy approached us probably 2 years ago now. And he said, hey, here's one of my biggest problems I would love to solve. We're required to run the Washington State Police Watch background check on every volunteer. Right now, we collect a piece of paper. It's hard to read the paper. Somebody has to go over to the watch system, type all that information in, manage that whole process, and it's a very labor-intensive process. So we just reached out to the Washington State Police, explained the problem, and they said, hey, as long as you're not charging the school for the background check, we'll allow you to integrate. So we became the first kind of third party they allowed to integrate with the watch a couple years ago. So now this is a totally automated process for any school in Washington State. We basically, I believe, and I'm not the tech guy here, I think they set up an API user with the Washington State Police for the school. We plug that into your SafeVisitor account. And now, once we do that, we again create this secured link that can be passed out to your volunteers, vendors, contractors, anybody that needs to be managed in the system. They click on a link, brings them to this page. They would select, and there's a lot of different test data in this demo site, but let's say they select, I'm a volunteer. Next step is we layer in your policy agreement. So each school can have a policy agreement for volunteers. You could have, and you could have different classifications of volunteers that have different types of agreements, or contractors, or substitute teachers, or whatever classification they want to create. It can all have an individual agreement. They can link to documents or video. This particular school has a anti-bullying video that they're required to watch. We also are building a full volunteer application here. So
Nice.
This will really be a cool feature. This is supposed to go out into production the 1st of February. We're building this for Tampa, Hillsborough, Florida schools. They're the 7th largest in the U.S. Right now, this is what it would look like. It actually will be contained within this whole process. But we could take a school's application, current application, in paper form or online form, and recreate it here within this solution, where it becomes a full volunteer management process. Once they start through this process, they electronically agree to the background check. And at this point, once they've entered their data, answered questions related to criminal convictions, signed the authorization electronically, at this point, it's going to push this over to the Washington State Police. It's going to run that background check in real time, and then it'll post back into their account under registrations. So we can set a rule, and the rule could be, if the background check comes back from the Washington State Police and it's clear, then it'll auto approve them, send them an email saying whatever the school wants it to say, give them a link to download the mobile app and activate it. So now all of that is managed, completely automated. So instead of touching 100% of the volunteer background checks, at this point, they're only going to see a background check if it comes back with this red triangle from the Washington State Police. And I believe there's 3 different types, an absolute match, and it will have within the information section here, this is not going to be a live example, but there would be a link here to the watch report. It's going to come back if there are possible matches. And then the third would be where they need to go out and be fingerprinted, and it'll come back and alert them to that. And then that process would continue as it does today. So this, really creates a completely automated process for those Washington State Police background checks. And most of the schools in Washington State that are using this, they run this check on an annual basis. So we can say, when do you want these to expire? If you want to bulk expire all of your volunteers, say, June 30th, and then have them renew on, August 15th before school starts again. And we can set those parameters in here, and what the system will do is once we expire them, it will start communicating with the volunteers, send them a link for them to renew. So it manages the whole renewal process as well. So the school not required to keep spreadsheets or, check manually to see if somebody's had a background check.
Yeah, that's cool. That's a nice feature.
Especially with some of the, school districts that are managing large numbers of volunteers, this is a really, really good process. And they have options here. Some of the schools in Washington are adding other searches to this, maybe a social security verification. So now I'm actually verifying their identity, any other names they've been known by. One of the really cool searches we've added is arrest alert. And what arrest alert is, so right now, if you're a Washington school and you're running the Washington State Police, you're only searching 1 out of 50 states. So, the likelihood that most of your volunteer population has never left Washington State, probably pretty small. So there's still some risk inherent in that search that, they could have committed a crime anywhere outside of Washington State. You wouldn't know about it. We have a tool called Arrest Alert. And so for a volunteer, for example, for like 10 cents a month per volunteer, we can give you a real-time alert if they're arrested anywhere in the United States. And how that works is if they get arrested, we get and booked into a facility, we'll get a real-time alert from that booking institution. It moves them to under review. They could not scan into a building or a school. It sends an alert to the team at the school that manages this, says, hey, you know, John Doe got arrested in, you know, Phoenix, Arizona. And they would log in here, there'd be an exclamation mark right here. They click on this, it gives them all the arrest data, the facility, and they manage that just like they would if somebody told them a volunteer was arrested or they saw it in the newspaper. And then they would have to take some action, either approving them or permanently denying them, or they could even add them to an exclusion list. But that simple 10 cents a volunteer tool right there would create kind of a national volunteer module or national volunteer background check for Washington State schools.
I like it.
There is visitor logs, so historic data. This comes in a lot. I know we had a school the week before last. I was told at a leadership meeting, they used this log because they had a visitor who was in a building, something had happened, I do not know what, but they were looking for somebody on a certain date, a female that was wearing a green shirt. And so they were able to come in here, they did a date range for that specific date, they knew what building it was, so they filtered it down to that building. And then we keep a log of not only the visitor, but we also store their ID badge. And so they were able to open the ID badge, look at each one of them until they found the one with the green shirt. They knew who the person was. And then they, you know, dealt with whatever that issue was. You've got the excluded parties list. They manage this. They can add exclusions right here. They can set that at a global or a building level. They can also use this for restricted access. Let's say person's not excluded, but whatever the restriction is, maybe only allowed to come to the front desk, but cannot go beyond front desk. Whatever they type into this details box will show on the front office team's computer when they log in. They can upload a photo. This will become really part of some of the future development we're going to do with access control companies. So we would be able to pass, you know, photos from excluded parties to your access control system. They could manage in the camera systems, things of that nature moving forward. We keep a separate denied entry log, so you could run a report on a monthly, weekly, daily basis, who was denied entry, for what reasons. You got the student pickup. If I go back to the dashboard, I've got Skyward up here, but we can integrate with any student information system. And so you could manage late arrival, early dismissal. We've got the only real-time integration with Skyward. And so with Skyward, you know, parents coming in to pick up a child for, say, a dental appointment, they type in student's name. We query the Skyward database for updates in real time. We can post who's approved, who's denied to pick up that child. You select who's picking them up. We take the photo of that person that's picking them up. We store it as a record in the student pickup log. And then we update the Skyward system in real time with that information. So it allows them to manage, you know, late arrival, early dismissal within our dashboard.
Nice.
And then the last component is a Safe Vendor component. And this one, as growing number of schools in Washington State using SafeVisitor. So if you had a large number of schools within your area that adopted SafeVisitor, we could put all of the vendors into SafeVendor once they've been credentialed, we can layer in arrest alerts so they're always up to date in terms of their criminal history. But then they could scan into any school using SafeVisitor and only be required to have that one background check that would be managed by us. So that's kind of a really high level of, kind of all that SafeVisitor can, can do for a school. Any questions, Don, from your side on this?
I do have a couple of questions. I like this system. I think it's really, really good, especially for the bigger schools that have a harder time with managing visitors. What would be the costs typically for the installation and the user fees and all that stuff?
Yep, no, that's a great question. Everything's kind of on a per building fee. So it's going to be somewhere between 400 and 450 a building. That's just based on the number of buildings. Then you got the Safe Volunteer module, which is included in this, the background check piece with the watch. There's no cost to the background checks. There is a fee if they add on like the student information system, and that's kind of based on the size of the school. So there's kind of a nominal fee to add that on. But that's, I can send you some pricing information that's kind of, gives a ballpark based on kind of what they might select.
Yeah, that'd be good because that's always going to be one of the top questions, especially with the budgets the way they are lately.
Yep, absolutely.
So is that per year, the 400?
Yeah, that's an annual software fee, correct.
Okay, so that's pretty reasonable.
Yeah, it's from the maintenance side, again, being a cloud-based system, very, very little work that has to happen on their end. So the IT team, once we get this thing up and running and configured the way they want it to work, it just kind of runs. And it connects all your campuses together, being in the cloud, so you can share data across all your schools.
Nice.
All right. Any other questions?
No, not at all. And yeah, I'm impressed with the system, and I think if the schools had a look at it, I think they'd be interested too. So having the recording, I think, will be good to send out to everybody.